Hi there, my name is Jennifer Dayton, author of the books Understanding Horses and 7 Secrets to Horsemanship. With me today to introduce this video on developing a great partnership with your horse, I have my old partner in teaching lessons, Egil. Egil was a lesson horse with me for many years. I've known him for a very long time. He's 26. And he's just hanging out with us today. And here is my own competitive horse and really special guy, Balanchine. Now, I talk about Balanchine's full story in the book Understanding Horses, but I'll give you a brief overview of that story now because that was a lot of the inspiration that I had to study what makes a good partnership with a horse and a rider, and what it is that people need to learn to really have that blossom for themselves. So Balanchine and I met each other at the breeding farm where he was born. He was one that I started as a 5-year-old, which was late, but often there was more horses to start on this breeding farm than there was people to train them. So we were often starting older horses, and there was an advantage to that. They were fully developed and grown and ready for work, and they were left to be horses for a while. And there is a definite advantage to that when it comes to training. The nature of a horse is very much there, and you don't have to work to get it. Whereas when people raise horses and with handling a lot, they can often become pets, and there's a difference there in how they'll respond to people. So that's another part of developing a partnership. But regardless, he was started as a 5-year-old, and with the first time I touched him, I did all the early work with him. I was completely in love with him. I was in love with his gentle nature. As you can see, he's got a big kind eye. He's 18 this year. He just turned 18 last week. He's very sweet. He's very docile. He's a bit of a worrier in that he needs a lot of security from his rider. He's not spooky or anything like that, but he worries and he always wants to do the right thing. So when you're introducing a new concept to him, you have to reassure him. He gets a little frantic if he doesn't understand it and he thinks he's doing it wrong because he wants to please so much. He's really got a heart of gold, and he's been competitive and in the ribbons in any discipline that I've competed him in. But backing up to when I first started him, within 3 months of first sitting on him, I could canter him around the farm bareback with a halter. He just had such a willing nature. And we would swim together, we would trail ride, we worked in the ring together. And the whole summer I knew that his destiny was supposed to be to our fall auction, which we have in our province. Now this fall auction is fashioned after the European auctions. It's 3 days. There's an opportunity to show the horse. At that time we demoed them twice a day. We had a gala in the evening that they were participating in, and then they were sold. People could try them out. And so he was at that sale, and at that sale he was green. He was worried about things, he looked worried about things, but he did everything he was asked. But he looked green enough that not a lot of people wanted to try him. I was desperately trying to find the money to buy him myself, and the breeder very kindly decided that he would protect him to a certain price point. And after that, because he was the first of our horses from the farm in the sale that year, we had to let him go. And he went for exactly that price point. I was devastated. I didn't even make it out of the ring without crying, and I was mourning for weeks. I didn't want to ride another horse. I was really devastated. So that was October the year he was started, and with that, by January, the person that had bought him, we hadn't heard anything from him, from the person that bought him, about him or anything until January the following year, a few months later. And she phoned the lady that had bought him and said, "This horse is no damn good. Nobody can ride him." And part of me was, to be honest, a little bit happy because I loved him so much. And then part of me was totally bewildered that such a sweet horse that wanted to try so hard wouldn't let anyone ride him. Like, he had such a gentle nature. So that really inspired me. I spent some time in Germany between then and when he finally came back to me. When I got back in the summer, I still hadn't heard anything from her. So I stalker called her until she finally responded, and she'd bought a stallion in Europe and it had been imported to our province and she had to come up and pick him up. And so she did ended up bringing him up. And so what happened was she would buy a lot of the lower end horses, and she would buy a trailer load and she would mark them up, you know, a few $1,000s each, make a good profit on her load. She would meet a group of trainers in New Hampshire that would come and see what she bought, and she dealt with the trainers, not not individual people, and she would sell the horses that way. So he was part of that, and so we went all the way to New Hampshire with this group of horses, and she had hired somebody to ride them all for the trainers so they could all see them go. And I guess when they were tacking him up, he exploded and just bucked so hard he pulled the billets from the saddle. Then they lunged him a lot because they were worried about getting on him. Then they gave the person that was going to ride him a leg up because they were being cautious at that point. He bucked again. The guy went straight up, crashed back down, got really hurt, had to go to the hospital. Nobody, of course, was interested in him. So then she went through two other trainers, one of them in Maine, a cowboy that she sent him to, who brought him back a week later and said, this horse is no damn good, like sell him for dog food. And then somebody else that he ended up in Winter Farm in South Dakota, where he spent there. He was untouched, really. I guess they had to rope him to catch him. He came back, he was skinny, he had cut his throat because they'd taken the mare that he had been with away, and he dug a trench 2 feet deep, she said, along the fence, just pacing, looking for his companion, and kept hitting his neck on a fence post and kept slicing it just a little bit at a time. And so that's how he came back. He had knots in his mane, he was skinny, he had chipped feet, he had a cut throat. He looked awful, to say the least. So what she ended up doing was taking a couple broodmares in trade for giving him back, which was very kind of the breeder to do that. And, you know, the first few days I showed her around the farm, and because she'd said she'd roped him off, or had somebody rope him off another horse to catch him. We'd kept him kind of in, and I lunged him in the morning and put him in a stall during the day. And he had lots of water and lots of feed in his stall. The third day was a Sunday, and she left by noon. And Sundays on the farm, we would just do basic chores. So our afternoons were really our own. We just had to turn horses in at the end of the afternoon. So that was the first day I had alone with him, and I decided I was just gonna, it was a hot July day, I was gonna walk him down to the river where we always swam. And just on the lead, in my running shoes, I went down to the river. And he was happy to be out of the stall, and he was looking around, and we got down to the river, and he started taking these big deep breaths, like, and he kept looking around, and just like in bewilderment almost. And he drank that river water like it was the best thing he ever tasted. Now on the farm, the river winds through the north field, and the house is actually on the west side of that. But if you went east, you had to cross the river the second time, and then you came up to the hayfield, but it was around the curve of the second crossing that we always swam. So I decided that I would take him on the north pasture, cross the river, go up the hill, go through the pass, through the trees, and come to the second crossing. And when I got to the second crossing, he did the same thing. These deep breaths, these deep sighs. He drank that river water like it was the best thing he ever tasted. And he just kept looking around, and just in bewilderment. You could tell he was happy to be back. And I led him halfway across the river where there was a big stone kind of sticking out of the water, high enough for me to stand on and jump on his back. And I did that and rode him home. So a horse that had been declared unrideable and then left for 7-8 months without anyone even touching him was very much rideable. It took me 6 months to get a saddle on him and do the girth up without altercation. And then years later, to about 2 or 3 years later, I had one where he panicked and he just falls to his knees. And to this day, he will still do that. There's a residual problem with the girth that had come from that experience in the States. And I've never totally gotten rid of it. Now I just let him walk as we do up the girth. I don't don't worry, it's not worth it to me for him to crash down on his knees and potentially hurt himself. So after seeing that, and I ended up, the breeder traded me some work on starting some other horses for him. So that's how he ended up in my life for on a permanent basis, and I'll never sell him. He's my angel. But it really did inspire me to pay attention to what it is that makes people understand how a horse was reacting. Like in hindsight, for him, he was probably very nervous in that first area where they tacked him up, and they probably read him as pushy and got a little tougher on him, and fight or flight comes out, right? He couldn't get away, so he had to explode. Where I really do believe that if it had been a young girl that had just petted him and kind of reassured him, and nothing would have happened badly at all. I don't think that it was him being a bad horse. I think he felt really trapped. So what is it that causes somebody to perceive behavior as in one way or another? I think this is a learned thing, and experience certainly plays into it. But it did cause me to pay attention to this for the last really heavily. He's 18 now. He was 5, 6 at the time. 12 years I've been paying attention to this. And I want for everyone to have a relationship with their horse like I have with this horse. He really is the kindest soul, and I do trust him completely. So that's the first pillar of a great partnership. And we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of a great partnership. The 4 pillars of a great partnership with your horse. We just mentioned trust. The second pillar is having mutual respect for each other. The third, understanding horses. And the 4th, spending quality time with your horse. So the first one is trust. You have to be able to trust your horse, and you have to have a level of trust. And so we're going to talk a little bit, and that's going to be the whole subject of the next video. If you sign up for the training videos, it's a free series. There's a more in-depth course offered at the end, but the free series will go into some detail on each one of these pillars. So the first one is trust, and you need to develop a level of trust. We're going to look at the aspects of trust. The second is mutual respect, and you'll see that these pillars, that they are all codependent on each other. I mean, you can't take one away and have a stable relationship. So mutual respect is the second part, and we're going to talk about what builds mutual respect and how important that is in what leads into the third pillar, which is understanding the nature of a horse. Okay, leadership is a big part of that, and it's also a big part of the mutual respect. So these are all, as you see, codependent on each other. And then the last one is quality time. So what is quality time with your horse? And what counts as quality time? And what counts as work? And it's important to have a balance of everything. If it's all business, it's not a really beautiful relationship the way that it could be if there's a balance of different aspects of time spent with your horse. So we're going to talk about all of those. In looking at trust, we have to consider what builds trust, and we have to really look at what we can do to improve the level of trust. In that, we have to address fears and where our fears come from. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the first pillar of a great relationship or a great partnership with your horse, and that is trust. So we have to talk about trust, we have to look at what builds trust in your horse. So what builds trust in your horse is first is confidence in yourself, in your horse, in your ability. If you're really just getting introduced to horses, it can be confidence in your instructor. You know, some of it, ignorance is bliss, right? Sometimes you don't know enough to know what feels like confidence and what doesn't. If you're just getting exposed to the horse world, you know, congratulations, it's a wonderful, very rewarding world. And I encourage you to do the research to get a good instructor to help you, because confidence is so important to develop in yourself and in your ability, and an instructor can make or break that. You know, I'll tell a little personal aside. I rode with a person that gave a better lesson if you kind of insulted yourself. There was a lot of ego involved in her own self-esteem, and I recognized that I got a better lesson if I just would put myself down and build her up, and I would get more out of it. But what I didn't realize in hindsight, in doing that, and I did that for quite a few years, was that I really did wear down my own true belief in myself. So I really strongly recommend taking the time to find an instructor that's recommended by other people, that will build your confidence, that will teach you the vital elements of being introduced to horses. Safety is such an important thing. They're big animals. They're very good-natured animals. But, you know, going from barn to barn, I often see beginner lessons taught, and safety is not a key component of that, and it should be. So really, do your research. It's worth it, you know, because the next part of building a good relationship of trust is having good experiences. Okay, so your experience level, whether they're good or bad, is going to influence your confidence. You know, I've got many years of experience with horses now. As a child, I wasn't able to ride, and so I didn't have the privilege of lessons. I didn't have that privilege, and I had to work hard. So determination comes into play for sure in building your relationship with horses. It's not dependent on you know what you've had as past experiences, in that you need to be determined to have the relationship that you want, to have the experiences you want with your horse, and it's important to keep your confidence up with that, and to keep your experiences good. It's okay to have a bad experience, but then you can't have a series of bad experiences and keep your confidence super high. It's not in our nature. I mean, we have a sense of self-preservation. Nobody wants to get hurt. So, you know, they're definitely coinciding. And the other thing is addressing your fears. Everybody has fears. We're going to look really in depth into fear, and where fear comes from, what we're actually afraid of, how to overcome fear in our video on trust. So, and definitely more into the course. So if you've had a bad experience and you really desperately want to get back into horses, but you've got to go overcome a fear, whether it can be a simple fear, it could be just being around them that you're afraid of. It could be a certain aspect of riding them, like cantering. A lot of people will have fear of cantering because they had a bad experience, or, you know, they had a horse run off with them or something like that. It could be more advanced, that you're afraid of a certain type of jump, or, you know, there's something that gets your heart rate up when you feel it. We all have our fears. It's learning how to deal with them and how to move past them that's really important. So you need to honor that, but part of it is discovering and breaking it down, and we're going to help you with that in the video on trust. Our third video will deal with the second pillar, the respect, having mutual respect, and how you achieve this, and what you can do to increase the level of mutual respect that you have with your partner, with your horse. So the second pillar of building a great relationship with your horse is mutual respect. Having mutual respect, the horse respecting you, you respecting the horse, is vital to any good relationship. Needs good respect between the two people in the relationship and the partnership. So how do you build mutual respect? Well, part of that is understanding the nature of the horse, which is the third pillar, and really understanding the need for a leadership role. Horses do need to have a leader in the relationship. It's lead or be led, and you need to be the leader. Now, how do you be a great leader? We'll talk about that in that video. And again, more in depth in the course that is offered at the end of the series. Understanding the nature of the horse and their need for a leader is important in understanding situations where you may not think the horse is actually leading you, but it's important to recognize all these little situations where it's the case. You know, if Balanchine is looking around right now, he is looking around me. He lifts his head over me. There are horses that will not respect you as your space, your personal space, and will look right into you or bump you. That's a small thing that makes a big difference, you know. Initiating the rub. If I rub him, he loves this. If I rub him, it's okay. If he starts to rub on me, it's not okay. Okay, so it's not the rubbing that's the issue. It's who starts it. That's okay, because in a field you'll never see a dominant horse or a submissive horse go up to a dominant horse and start scratching them. It always has to be the dominant one that starts it. And so you have to think of yourself as the lead horse in the herd, okay? Because that's how they understand it. We need to learn to speak their language. I talk a lot about that in my book, Understanding Horses, as well as in the book, Seven Secrets of Horsemanship is mentioned. It's important to have a sense of compassion with that, a sense of understanding, empathy, understanding their behavior, but doing it with a sense of caring and love behind it. It's easy to interpret being a leader as being the boss and being tough, and you hear people that tend to speak out of fear but are constantly kind of yelling at their horse or speaking loudly to their horse, and the horse is not necessarily doing anything wrong, or they might be dancing a little bit because they're nervous, and they would do much better with a reassuring tone than a "hey, quit that," So that's all part of understanding horses, but it's all part of building mutual respect as well. So we're going to look at how you achieve mutual respect and how to increase it in this little segment here.
Understanding horses can mean several different things. How a horse responds, what's the nature of the horse, how he's meant to behave or respond. It can mean learning to speak the language of horse. Body language plays into understanding horses, understanding their body language, understanding how your body language affects their response. And how you accurately determine reasons for certain behaviors. That's part of it all.
The third pillar is understanding horses. We've talked about that in the first two pillars. We mentioned it in both of them. Understanding the nature of a horse, that they're animals of prey, that we're predators. Regardless of whether we're vegetarians or not, we're still, our species are predators. And the fact that they're animals of prey and let us ride them and sit up on their back is actually incredible in itself. But then, in terms of having any problems with your horse and overcoming any issues, in building the confidence and trust in your horse, it's important to understand why they might behave in a certain way in a certain situation. So often horses, like in his case, are misread. It's not that his behavior was good when he bucked hard and hurt the person that tried to get on him. It's that they had a chance to understand him and didn't. Does that make sense? Because it's really important that the horses are understood well, that you have a good assessment of what went wrong or what's going wrong before it escalates, right? It's way harder. I've had the opportunity to help some people with problem horses, that are labeled problem horses, and having had many years of experience starting horses, and that's my true love. I really enjoy doing the initial work on a horse and building their confidence. But it's way easier because they're a blank slate. They haven't had bad experiences. And often when the horse has had bad experiences, it's not a person going out and saying, "Oh, I'm going to screw this horse up." It's them not understanding what they're doing quite right, or understanding how their behavior is actually affecting the horse. And I talk about things simple as putting the halter on. A lot of people put the halter on with aggressive body language. Again, we talk about this in depth in the video, more in depth in the course, and I go through this a lot in Understanding Horses, the subject of the whole book. So that is part of it. So what we're going to look at now is quality time with your horse as well. So quality time with your horse can mean a whole bunch of things. So let's look at the following slides that will start looking at ways that you can spend some quality time with your horse.
I think often quality time gets hard to do because we live such busy lives. Quality time doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's nice if it can, but there are things that you can do just a few moments extra with your horse that do a whole lot to improve your relationship. Let's look at a few ideas of what you can do to spend quality time with your horse out of the saddle. Spending a few moments hand grazing in the summertime, especially if your horse doesn't have access to a lot of pasture, can really not only make your horse shiny and much more healthy looking, but the horses really enjoy this time. Grooming, spending extra time grooming, pampering your horse, giving him a bath once in a while if he likes baths, feeding, and I don't necessarily mean just treats, but if you can, go at a time where they're about to get their evening feed, and ask if you can participate if you're not keeping your own horses. I think that that's a nice way to spend time. Taking your horse for a walk, just taking them for a wander around the property once in a while. Trail riding your horses, if you're comfortable on the trails and relax with it. Horses, it's like a mental vacation for both of you. Trail riding is really important, and I trail ride all the competitive horses that I work with. Cross training. I love it when people do a variety of things instead of drilling their horse with one particular thing that they're working on, that they do some flat work or dressage with their horse, that they do some good gymnastic type work with their horse, whether it's poles, whether it's bounces, whether it's little cavaletti, that kind of thing, as well as jumping if you're riding jumping horses, or whatever it is, working cows if you're riding Western horses, and things like that. Traveling with your horse, taking your horse on a little vacation, taking your horse to different arenas for clinics or different activities that are in your community. Those are all ways that you can improve your riding, improve your horsemanship, and spend some quality time with your horse. Lunging your horse.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something from it. None of this is new information, and I'm sure you can recognize that, but hopefully it's putting it in together in a way that's helpful to you, that maybe you haven't thought of before in that light, that maybe you realize, hey, you know, I don't really trust my horse. I need to work on that part of it, or I don't really have respect for my horse, or he doesn't respect me. Maybe that's the key. You know, you need to have a harmonious and beautiful relationship. To me, is one of the biggest rewards of doing this whole horse thing. And so I hope this stuff has helped. I hope this information has helped. I encourage you to sign up if you haven't already to receive the rest of the series. It's a free series. And if you really like the series, there's an in-depth course that's offered at the end, and it'll tell you how you can sign up for that as well. So again, my name is Jennifer Dayton. Thank you for watching, and go out and enjoy.